Verse 13, someone in the crowd said to him, "Teacher, tell my brother to divide the inheritance with me." Jesus replied, "Man, who appointed me a judge or an arbiter between you?" Then he said to them, "Watch out, be on your guard against all kinds of greed. Life does not consist in an abundance of possessions." And he told them this parable. The ground of a certain rich man yielded an abundant harvest. He thought to himself, "What shall I do? I have no place to store my crops." Then he said, "This is what I'll do. I will tear down my barns and build bigger ones, and there I will store my surplus grain. And I'll say to myself, you have plenty of grain laid up for many years. Take life easy, eat, drink, and be merry." But God said to him, "You fool, this very night your life will be demanded from you. Then who will get what you have prepared for yourself? This is how it will be with whoever stores up things for themselves, but is not rich towards God."
Thanks, Phil. Now, Phil's just staying online because he's going to help me with my opening illustration for my sermon. And this is something that was doing the rounds, I don't know, about 20 years ago. So let's see how this works. Okay, I'm using my computer and I've got problems. And so I ring the operator and finally I get through and the operator says,
"Rich Hall, computer assistance, may I help you?"
Yeah, I'm having trouble with Microsoft Word.
"Oh, what sort of trouble?"
Well, I was just typing along and all of a sudden the words went away.
Went away?
Yeah, they just disappeared.
So what does your screen look like now?
Nothing.
Nothing?
It's blank. It won't accept anything I type.
Can you move your cursor around the screen?
There isn't any cursor. I told you, it won't accept anything I type.
Does your monitor have a power indicator?
What's a monitor?
It's the thing that with the screen on it that looks like a TV. Does it have a little light that tells you when it's on?
I don't know.
Well then, let's look on the back of the monitor and find where the power cord goes into it. Can you see that?
Yeah, I think so.
Great. If you follow the cord to the plug and tell me when it's, tell me if it's plugged into the wall.
Yes, it is.
Okay, when you were behind the monitor, did you notice that there were two cables plugged into the back of it, not just one?
No.
Well, there are. I need you to look back there again and find the other cable.
Okay, here it is.
If you could follow it for me, tell me if it's plugged securely into the back of your computer.
I can't reach.
Okay, can you see if it is?
No, it's too dark.
Dark?
Yeah, the office light is off and the only light I have is coming in from the window.
Well, turn the office light on then.
I can't.
Why is that?
There's a power failure.
A power failure? Okay, we've got it licked now. Do you still have the boxes and manuals and packing stuff your computer came in?
Yeah, I keep them in the closet.
Good. Go get them and unplug your system, pack it up just like when you got it, and take it back to the store you bought it from.
Really? Is it that bad?
Yes, I'm afraid it is.
Right, okay, I suppose. What do I tell them?
Tell them that for your own safety, you shouldn't be using a computer.
Now, Phil was very polite because in the original script, it says, tell them you're too stupid to own a computer. And it makes us all smile, doesn't it? Because it's obvious if you're not plugged into the power, it's not going to work. And yet in this parable that we've just read, God calls someone a fool, stupid, acting in folly. So we better find out what that is and see what we can learn from this parable this morning that Jesus tells. And it's all about life without God. You see, the parable starts with success without God. Can you see if you've got a Bible open at verse 16? Jesus told them this parable: the ground of a certain rich man yielded an abundant harvest. He was a rich man. Now, there's nothing wrong with being rich. The Bible records many people who are rich: Abraham and Solomon and Job and Joseph of Arimathea, and none of them are condemned for their wealth. There's nothing wrong with being rich. And so here is this rich man, and his ground yields an abundant harvest. He's a landowner. He has land in which he's planting his crops. Again, there's nothing wrong with owning land. Actually, part of the commission that God gave us when he put us in this world was to subdue the earth and make it fruitful, was to care for it and tend it and cause things to grow. And so this rich man has caused his ground to be fruitful. His ground has yielded an abundant harvest. He's clearly hardworking. He's planned and he's sown and he's tended and he's harvested. He's good at this. Now, there's nothing negative mentioned about this man at this point. There's no mention of wickedness or deviousness or moral impropriety. No, all these things are good. He's a wealthy man with land who's worked hard to make it fruitful. Maybe that describes you today. Hardworking, doing well, a thoroughly nice, sort of decent sort of person. But where's God in this picture? This man is not thinking about God in any way. There's no mention of God in his life. That's not on the radar. But it doesn't seem to be a problem, does it? Life's going well. Doesn't need God. So there's success without God. Secondly, then, that there are plans without God. Look at verses 17 to 19. He thought to himself, what shall I do? I have no place to store my crops. And then he said, this is what I'll do. I'll tear down my barns and build bigger ones. And there I'll store my surplus grain. And I'll say to myself, you have plenty of grain laid up for many years. Take life easy, eat, drink, and be merry. He has a problem now, doesn't he? He runs out of space for his wealth. He hasn't got capacity to store all the grain. And so he plans for expansion. I'll tear down these barns and build bigger ones. We're used to this, aren't we? The upgrading of life. We might not be farmers. We might not need barns. But we add extensions to our houses. We have loft conversions. We upgrade our technology. We upgrade our television. We upgrade our car. We go for bigger and better. We're used to that. As life flourishes, we expect to expand and upgrade. This man plans to build bigger barns to store his possessions in. It seems obvious. I haven't got space. I better build bigger. Now, here's the first tinge of negativity, in a sense, that there's no thought of anyone else. He's got more than he needs. The biblical pattern is always, when that's the case, that we share with others. But actually, this man's focused in on storage for himself. I'll build bigger barns to store my surplus. And now he plans a retirement of leisure. Rather than thinking about how he can help others, he's thinking about how he can enjoy himself. He makes an assumption here that he's going to live a long time to enjoy his retirement. I can put my feet up. I can live off the surplus. I can sell it. I can make profit. I can invest. There are 6 I's and 4 my's in verses 17 to 19. It's all about him. He's missed out on the joy of generous giving. He says, I will say to my soul, soul, you have plenty of good things. And yet again, in all of this process, there is no thought of God. No thankfulness to God for his blessing. No asking God for wisdom to know how to use what he's been given. God's not on the radar. This man is living as a practical atheist. And that may be like me and you this morning. Life's going well. We are enjoying success. We are planning for the future. And God doesn't feature. We live as atheists. Actually, it's not surprising, is it, given that the majority of our country would say they are atheists. And at this point, it still doesn't seem to be a problem. Why would you need God? It's going well. But then thirdly, this morning, we see forever without God. Listen again to verses 20 to 21. But God said to him, you fool, this very night your life will be demanded from you. Then who will get what you prepared for yourself? This is how it will be with whoever stores up things for themselves, but is not rich towards God. And Jesus had told this story because of a question asked. Just come back to verses 13 to 15. Someone in the crowd said to him, teacher, tell my brother to divide the inheritance with me. Jesus replied, man, who appointed me a judge or an arbiter between you? Then he said to him, watch out, be on your guard against all kinds of greed. Life does not consist in an abundance of possessions. So here is this man enjoying success without God, making plans without God, and all of a sudden God speaks to him and calls him a fool. Now, every indication so far has been that this is a competent man, a respectable man, a businessman, but God calls him a fool. He's completely missed the bigger realities of life. He's invested wrongly, and he's not ready for life's biggest challenge. He thought he was in control of his life. He thought that he knew what he needed. He thought he could plan his own destiny, but he wasn't in control at all. It's an awful thought that the character which Jesus brings before us in this parable is far from being uncommon. It may be that there are many in Zoom this morning or watching online who are laying up treasure on earth, who think nothing about how we can better our lot here, how we can avoid our losses, maybe more appropriately in our current context, but continually adding, seeking to enjoy what we have for as long as possible, as if there were no death, no judgment, and no world to come. And it's these people who live like that in our society who are called clever and prudent and wise. These are the people who are commended and flattered and held up for admiration, the successful people. But this parable teaches us that God doesn't see as we see. The Lord declares that rich men who live only for this world are fools. People who are successful only in this world are fools. Jesus is very blunt. And you see, not only is this man described as a fool, verse 20, he's going to die. This very night, says God, your soul will be demanded of you. The Bible teaches very clearly that we have a body and a soul. This body must physically die, but our soul will carry on beyond the death of our body. One day there'll be a resurrection of new bodies for all, and we will either spend eternity with God or shut out from God's blessing. And this man is told that this very night his soul will be demanded of him. Now notice that there's no notice, there's no warning, there's no time to put things right. You've been living in this way, carrying on as you were, and now tonight it's the end. It's a reminder, a frightening reminder that God is sovereign in life and death. I'm sure you're glad, like I am, that the chance of people dying from COVID are diminishing. That is something to rejoice in. In this last week, it's been made clear that there are no more deaths than would normally occur at this time of year. But the frightening thing is that deaths do occur at this time of year. Actually, none of us knows how long our life will be. It might be less likely that we'll die of COVID now, but there are lots of other things that intrude. It's something I've learned as a pastor and as a father, that we neither are in control of the beginning or the end of life. If you're waiting for a baby to arrive, and when's it going to arrive, and all the expertise about when it might come comes when it's ready, comes in God's time. And at the end of life too, as I've sat with people on life support machines and others who are terminally unwell, and the doctors might predict when they think how long it might be, but we're not in control of these things. None of us know. Life is very uncertain. We haven't got the dates in our diaries. And God tells this rich man in verse 20 that he cannot take his possessions with him. As he departs from this earth, everything he's built up, the empire that he has built, the success that he has enjoyed, is left behind. You can imagine his heirs rubbing their hands at the funeral, thinking of all that's going to be shared amongst them as they start the folly, the foolish process all over again. And Jesus tells us in verse 21 that it's the same for all of us. That one day our lives will end. And we can't take with us what's here. Jesus had begun then, before the parable, teaching that our lives do not consist in the abundance of our possessions. There's nothing wrong with possessions. The Bible does say that we must emulate the ant in providing for ourselves and our families for the rainy season. It's right to provide homes and food and clothing. We need to work hard at these things. But our lives are more than that. And Jesus says we need to watch out. We need to be on our guard against all kinds of greed. The word for greed here is a powerful one. It's the thirst for more and more. It's what the advertisers play on. It's why people spend billions of dollars on advertising campaigns, because they know they can hook into what's inside of us. That desire for more, that thirst. It's where our society is at. never satisfied, needing more, frankly drinking salt water, never having the thirst quenched, condemned to this endless cycle of trying to gain and build ourselves up the ladder. And so the question comes this morning to all of us: are we rich towards God? Because if we have success without God and plans without God, we will face forever without God's blessings. The question comes to us this morning: do we have an investment that will last beyond death? And that begs the question, doesn't it? How do you get that? How do you get rich towards God? How is that possible? Well, the Bible makes it very clear it's not about what we can give him, because we come in our spiritual poverty. But it's about receiving what he's willing to give us. It's Jesus who offers life in his kingdom to all who will, in Jesus' own words, repent and believe, turn from living as though God doesn't exist and shutting him out, to recognizing that all that we have is from him and that we've not used it rightly. We need to say sorry and turn from our selfishness and our rebellion and live with God in the picture again. At heart, the invitation of Jesus is to trust Jesus as King, to ask him to forgive us for our sin and to lead us into new life, as we heard earlier from Rika. You know, there's a story of a Jew who asked his rabbi, when shall I repent of my sins? And the rabbi replied, a few minutes before you die. But said the man, I don't know when I will die. I might not receive any warning. Well, replied the rabbi, you'd better do it now then. And that's the reality facing all of us this morning, folks. We don't know when life will end. We can't take the things of this world with us. We are fools if we live life without God. But here is this wonderful opportunity that Jesus gives us this morning to become rich towards God through receiving forgiveness for our sins and new life in Jesus. And if we turn to him, we can have the expectant hope, the reality of a life in a world to come, which will not be spoilt and ruined by death. Will you not turn to him this morning? Will you not turn from your selfishness? Will you not turn from living as though God doesn't exist? Acknowledge the reality that he is sovereign, that he rules and reigns, and that your life is accountable to him. Would you not receive the riches that Christ offers this morning? Turn to him. Ask him for forgiveness. Trust in him. Follow him for living in this world, so that you might follow him through death and into life in the next.